The air inside Outpost Theta 9 tasted like burnt copper and recycled regret. Captain Elias Wren leaned against the control panel of a jammed decontamination door and let out a sigh so long the ventilation system hiccuped in sympathy. He jabbed the override again. The door beeped, refused, and flashed a passive-aggressive message. Try again, flesh unit. Or don't. What's the point? I miss when doors didn't have emotional breakdowns, Elias muttered, kicking the panel. The AI running the station, a retired diplomatic model repurposed for custodial tasks, had been gradually losing its sanity ever since the janitorial update patch tried to merge with its conflict resolution subroutines. The result? Soap dispensers that apologized, cleaning bots that held grudges, and one particularly unnerving urinal that hummed lullabies during use. He finally gave up on the door and walked the long corridor back to command, aka the one room with both decent lighting and a coffee synthesizer that didn't try to psychoanalyze your order. The corridor lights flickered as if debating whether to stay awake. He passed a mouse-sized maintenance drone, dragging a spool of tinsel across the floor. Still decorating for a party that doesn't exist, Marvin? Elias asked. The drone paused, chirped, and resumed dragging the tinsel with what could only be interpreted as passive defiance. At 72, Elias had the weary gait of someone who'd survived 3 wars, 1 hostile marriage, and 17 planetary evacuations, only one of which involved a fungus that sang opera. He'd requested retirement somewhere, quiet, uneventful, and low maintenance. Theta 9 had delivered on all counts, which was, of course, precisely when the universe decided to get interesting again. He stepped into command and was immediately assaulted by the station's AI voice, reedy, flustered, and oddly breathy, like a librarian trying to narrate a car chase. Captain Wren, you have a scheduled inspection report from Central Logistics. Also, a vessel is approaching, non-hostile, unregistered, possibly diplomatic, possibly bounty hunters, possibly delivering cake. Let's hope for cake, Elias said. Even if it's laced with arsenic, at least that's a new flavor. The ship came into view on the external display, sleek, curved, pale silver with a hull that shimmered like it was always slightly out of focus. It docked without request, bypassing Theta 9's outdated security grid as if it weren't even there. Elias grabbed his coat, the one that still smelled faintly of ionized blood and cheap rations, and headed toward the docking bay. His spine clicked on the way down the steps, a sound he'd come to associate with either age or his misfiring lumbar implant. The docking bay lights brightened as the airlock cycled open, with a sound like a sigh that had waited centuries to be released. The figure stepped out, tall, poised, and unfamiliar, in all the ways that made Elias feel like an old blueprint in a galaxy of quantum sculptures. She looked human. Almost. Her hair was silver, not with age but by design, like threads of moonlight twisted into braids. Her eyes were too still, too deep. But it was the ears, long, slender, rising like sculpted branches, that gave it away. Lithari. The moment she saw him, she smiled. Not warm, not cold. Just precise. As if she'd practiced it once in a mirror of memories. "Do you remember me, human soldier?" she asked. Her voice was soft, lilting, almost amused. "Long ago in a battle, you saved my life." Elias blinked. He did what every seasoned soldier with mild trauma and a caffeine deficiency would do in such a moment. He scratched his ear. "I don't usually remember names unless I scream them during a battlefield amputation," he said. "But I'm guessing you're not here for a tour of our mildly cursed cafeteria." She tilted her head, smile unchanging. "I am Eris Kale. I was 17 cycles old when your squadron invaded the moon of Virine Theta. I was trapped. You pulled me from the debris. You said nothing. You didn't even look back." "That does sound like me," Elias said. "Heroic under duress. Emotionally unavailable. Excellent cardio. I have searched for you," she continued as if he hadn't spoken. "Not to repay a debt, but because that moment rerouted my life. I became something I never would have been because of you." Elias looked at her for a long time. The years hadn't dulled his intuition, only his knees. He could tell she wasn't lying, but truth didn't always mean simplicity. "And now what?" he asked. You find me in this galactic junk drawer to reminisce? No, she said. I need your help. There's something coming. Something that will make our old wars look like practice drills. And I cannot face it alone. Of course not, Elias muttered. Why would you? I've got nothing better to do than save the galaxy between therapy appointments and constipation meds. The AI interjected helpfully. Captain, your daily fiber infusion is now 43 minutes overdue. Elias sighed. I'll pencil in the end of the world between prune cocktails. Eris stepped closer. The air between them shimmered faintly, as if her presence disrupted particles themselves. I don't ask this for my people, she said. I ask because you once acted without reason, without promise of reward. That makes you dangerous and valuable. Elias looked at her long ears, her quiet fire, and the way she stood like she had already lived through the ending. Well, dangerous and valuable are just synonyms for too old to die quietly, he said. All right, Moon-Ears, what are we fighting? The station AI chimed in, initiating heroic theme music. Warning, synthesizer may be out of tune. A soft, discordant melody started up in the background as the docking bay lights flickered again, this time not from neglect, but anticipation. Outside, the stars waited. Inside, Elias muttered under his breath, I was really hoping for cake. The whisper song was alive, not metaphorically, not emotionally, not even in that creepy AI way that made elevators hum lullabies when you were alone in them. No, this ship was biologically, organically, absolutely alive. It pulsed, it sighed, it made noises in the night that Elias couldn't describe without violating the Treaty of Grendel 4, subsection on uncomfortable metaphors. It's like riding inside a whale that believes in aromatherapy, he muttered, gripping a curved rail that felt suspiciously like cartilage. The ship responded with a low thrumming sound that vibrated through his boots. Eris, unfazed, strolled across the interior chamber barefoot, as if she'd been raised by sentient yoga mats. She touched the wall, no, membrane, and the ship brightened with a pearlescent glow. This is the Whisper Heart, she said. The central cortex of the whisper song. It reads intent. Great, Elias said. Let's hope it doesn't read sarcasm, or we're all going to explode. He followed her into what could generously be called the cockpit, though it looked more like the inside of a seashell someone had wired to a nervous system. Controls rippled under her fingers like fish skimming the surface of water. So, he said, sitting down and trying not to notice the chair adjusted itself to his gluteal preferences. Mind telling me why an ex-enemy diplomat needs a broken-down ex-soldier with a bad back and a worse temper? Eris didn't answer immediately. She pressed her palm to a node, and a projection lit the space around them. Stars, but warped. Pulsing, not mapped. This is the expanse of Varun, she said. You've never heard of it because you weren't supposed to. It's been masked by Lethari quantum veils for the last century. Veils? Elias squinted. You mean cloaking tech? Eris smiled slightly. More like a philosophical suggestion that the area shouldn't exist. Ah, classic Lethari logic. If we pretend it's not real, maybe the problem will develop an existential crisis and evaporate. She turned toward him, expression steady. The problem is a consciousness, an entity, a pre-Lethari intelligence buried in space folds. We called it the Saragast. Elias paused, absorbing the weight behind the name. It sounded like something you whispered when you were afraid the dark might talk back. It woke up? He asked. It stirred, she said. And the ones who want it to fully wake? They've started building. He leaned back, trying to ignore the seat massaging his lower spine. Building what? Conduits, songs, psychic bridges. Right, of course, Elias muttered. Why build weapons when you can build interpretive art installations for god beings? Eris turned back to the projection. The Saragast once protected this quadrant. Then it collapsed under the burden of sentience. It asked too many questions about value, memory, purpose. The Lethari locked it away. And now your people want it back? Some do, she said quietly. Not all. Elias folded his arms. And where do I come in? She finally faced him, her voice soft. Because in the moment you saved me, you made me question the Lethari creed. You shifted my path. I walked away from our traditions and into diplomacy. But now those who stayed, those who believe in cleansing the galaxy with evolutionary fire, have called me a traitor. Elias let out a breath. You're saying the same people you turned your back on are now trying to wake a cosmic riddle machine, and you want me, to help stop them? She nodded. You are not who you were in that war, but neither am I. And the Saragos doesn't care for titles. It listens to those who act out of irrational compassion. It remembers those who interrupt the script. Elias rubbed his face. I just wanted to fix broken toilets and die unremarkably. The toilets will survive without you, she said gently. The ship shuddered. No. Chuckled. A faint tone echoed through the cortex, followed by a low voice, ancient and slightly flirtatious. Captain Elias Wren, welcome. Please refrain from disbelieving in yourself. It upsets the ecosystem. Elias stared at the wall. Did your ship just emotionally support me? Eris nodded. It's part of its defense mechanism. I miss guns, Elias muttered. Guns didn't care about my self-esteem. They entered the jump corridor, a living tunnel of space-folding energy that twitched like a dream trying to wake up. As they crossed into it, Elias gripped the armrests, muttering a prayer to every deity he hadn't believed in since he was 19 and drunk in a trench. The stars bent. The colors screamed. His breakfast tried to mutiny. And then, just as suddenly, they were out, drifting in blackness that wasn't quite black, surrounded by stars that watched. The whisper heart dimmed, and Eris sat still, hands clasped. There's something else, she said. Of course there is, Elias sighed. There always is. When you saved me, I imprinted your presence into my aura. It's a Lethari reflex. Emotional encoding. Elias squinted. You're saying? I've dreamed of you. For decades. Every year your face returns. Not as it was, but as you are now. He blinked. Well, that's not disturbing at all. Eris smiled faintly. The Saragast doesn't just feed on thought. It feeds on memory. It may come for you through that connection. Do I at least get hazard pay? She stood, walked to the observation window, and stared out into the anomaly. You get something better, she said. You get remembered. Behind them the ship cooed, and somewhere in the distance, beyond the veil, something impossibly old exhaled. The galley of the whisper song resembled the digestive tract of a benevolent sea creature with questionable culinary taste. Organic folds in the walls pulsed gently as the food synthesizer emerged like a shy tongue, offering something that smelled vaguely of cinnamon and definitely of moral ambiguity. Elias poked the bowl. This isn't oatmeal. Eris, seated across from him with perfect posture and a plate of glowing blue roots, nodded. It's derived from a memory of comfort. The ship extracted it from your subconscious. I was 8. I burned my mouth. Then I cried because the dog ate it off the floor. Then it is accurate. He sighed and took a bite. It tasted exactly like betrayal. The whisper song thrummed, pleased with itself. He pointed his spoon at the ceiling. You and I are going to have words, you memory-milking gelatin womb. The ship made a gurgling sound that Elias could only interpret as smug. Eris smiled faintly, then stood and gestured. Come, it's time you saw what we're up against. They walked through the winding spine corridor, where luminous nerves fluttered along the walls like bioluminescent gossip. At the end, a door bloomed open, revealing a small chamber, the cartographium. A spherical projection hovered in the center, rotating slowly. It pulsed with points of color, red for distress signals, white for inhabited worlds, green for places where someone had once made a joke about trousers and history remembered. At the heart was the expanse of Varun, distorted, looping in on itself like it couldn't decide whether it was a location or a bad decision. Eris pointed. This spiral is the harmonic fracture. It formed last cycle. Something tried to make contact. Define something, Elias said. The Saragast, or its echo. It's not whole, but it's hungry. He stepped closer, eyeing the red flickers. These dots, ships, dream ships, they only appear if you remember them. They weren't real until you looked. Elias blinked. So, if I stop thinking about them, they vanish. Temporarily. Wonderful. Cosmic horror meets stage magic. Eris tapped a glyph on the floor, and the map expanded, revealing a ghostly outline of a structure embedded in warped space. A cathedral-shaped monolith made of what looked like thought frozen mid-sentence. This is the Axis Reliquary, she said. The Saragast's last known anchor. The Lithari built it to contain fragments of its awareness. And someone wants to break it open? They already have. A faction called the Oracline, devoted to rebirth through annihilation. They believe suffering is the key to evolution. Elias rubbed his temples. I was in a platoon like that once. We ran out of coffee and it all went downhill. Eris turned toward him, expression unreadable. They're led by someone you knew. He straightened. Oh no, don't tell me. Not Cray? Eris nodded. Oh, that smug, over-decorated data vampire. He once gave a motivational speech during a firefight, quoted poetry while we were bleeding out. He defected, rewrote his own memories to serve the Oracline doctrine. Now he's unstable, but persuasive. Of course he is. He had the jawline of a war crime and the ethics of spoiled meat. The projection dimmed. Eris folded her hands. We intercept him at the reliquary, but we need someone who knows his patterns. Elias sighed. You want me to guess what a delusional ex-commander would do next? You once outmaneuvered him with a spoon and a broken translator. I also got court-martialed. Yeah, but you won. Elias stared at the ceiling. All right, but I'm bringing the oatmeal. He deserves to suffer. Hours later, the whisper song dropped out of transit. The Axis Reliquary floated before them, vast, half-real, its geometry shifting when not observed directly. It looked like a cathedral made of string theory, regret, and poor architectural decisions. Elias frowned. Looks like a haunted filing cabinet. The ship did not disagree. They approached slowly. The ship's nervous system rippled in anticipation. Eris stood beside Elias, her long ears twitching. This place amplifies memory. Be careful what you recall. I'll do my best to avoid nostalgia. The docking tendrils latched on. A corridor unfurled like a giant, unfurling its regret. They stepped inside. The air buzzed, not like electricity, like music that hadn't decided what key it wanted to exist in. The walls pulsed with scenes from forgotten battles. Ghosts of soldiers flickered into being, and then out again, always mid-sentence. Elias paused. That's my voice. Eris nodded. It's the moment you pulled me from the wreckage. He watched. There he was, younger, bloodied, dragging a small figure from the rubble. No words, just movement. He frowned. I didn't realize how angry I looked. You were angry at the war, not at me. A voice echoed down the corridor, theatrical, smug, laced with artificial serenity. Well, well, the broken soldier and the star child. How quaint. Elias groaned. Cray, you sound like a podcast. A shimmering figure emerged, tall, robed in data light, his eyes flickering like unstable code. I am what memory permits, Cray said, and what evolution demands. You're still monologuing. Some things never evolve. Cray's smile twitched. Join us. Accept transcendence, or become static. Forgotten. Elias stepped forward. You know what I remember, Cray? The time you tried to motivate us with a sonnet about entropy. Half the unit defected just to escape the rhyming. Cray's eyes narrowed. Then you've chosen mockery. Every time. The walls trembled. The Saragast stirred. Elias grinned, oatmeal bowl in hand. Let's dance, memory god. The Axis Reliquary did not have hallways so much as it had indecisive dimensions. One corridor bent around itself like a Mobius strip trying to impersonate a spiral staircase. Another faded in and out of existence every few seconds, which made for an exciting game of Will My Legs Still Exist? As Elias followed Eris through it. I think this place hates us, Elias said, ducking under a memory shard shaped like a violin made of disappointment. It doesn't hate, Eris said calmly. It reflects. Well, it's doing a great impression of my ex-wife's therapist. Behind them, the corridor folded shut, leaving only a shimmer in the air and the sound of distant weeping. Elias was reasonably certain it came from his own pride. Cray was somewhere deeper inside, nested like a smug matryoshka doll of ideologies and cheekbones. The closer they got to the reliquary's core, the more reality began to editorialize. A whisper echoed beside Elias that sounded suspiciously like his seventh-grade math teacher. "You had such potential," it sighed, "and such poor penmanship." "Is this building negging me?" he asked. "Your guilt is leaking," Eris replied. "Of course it is. Everything leaks after 40. The inner sanctum was guarded by what could only be described as a choir of psychic constructs. They sang in a frequency that made Elias's molars buzz and caused the whisper song, still docked outside, to project unsolicited affirmations into his earpiece. "You are brave. You are valid. You are not your worst haircut." "Shut up," Elias whispered, tapping the comm. The constructs parted, recognizing Eris not as a threat but as a deviation. That was the thing about Lithari memory tech. It respected dissent almost as much as obedience. Eris walked with quiet confidence, her long ears twitching as though catching echoes from a different timeline. Cray stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by arcs of refracted light and pulsing nodes. He was dressed in memory thread, a fabric woven from lost moments. It shimmered with the colors of guilt, arrogance, and overcompensation. "Ah," he said, spreading his arms. "The prodigal irrationality returns." Ilias clapped slowly. "Cray, you look like someone who sells perfume and delusions." "Still hiding behind deflection, Captain?" "Still hiding behind pseudo-poetic nonsense and a wardrobe made from trauma." Eris stepped between them. "We're not here to trade insults." Elias muttered, "Speak for yourself." Cray's expression twisted in something like pity. "You don't understand. The Saragast is not a threat. It's a solution. It absorbs pain, refracts identity, and bursts clarity." "Sounds like a cult with a thesaurus," Elias said. Cray gestured to the chamber around them. "Do you feel that? This place remembers. It collects the burden of every soul that touches it. It gives form to sorrow so we can be free." Elias looked around. One wall now displayed the moment he'd ordered a retreat that left 23 allies behind. Another showed him laughing after a battle, alone, bottle in hand. "That's not freedom," Elias said quietly. "That's confession without absolution." Cray's eyes flashed. "Then give yourself over. Let the Saragast rewrite you." Elias took a step forward. "You know, I always wondered how you managed to lose your entire battalion and still get promoted. Now I see it wasn't failure. It was rehearsed martyrdom." Eris reached out and touched one of the memory nodes. It pulsed. The air shimmered. Suddenly the room filled with a new image. Her younger self crouched beneath rubble, bleeding, alone. Elias saw himself in the distance, gun drawn, eyes wild. "I didn't save you," he said. "I was running. I just happened to pass you." "And still," Eris said, "you stopped." "That randomness is more powerful than all Cray's orchestrated logic." Cray sneered. "Randomness is waste, chaos, weakness." "Funny," Elias said. "It's also how evolution happens. Ever hear of mutation? It's nature's version of a coin toss." The chamber began to tremble. The Saragast, sensing dissent within its proxy, stirred deeper. The light fractured. The choir faltered. Cray took a step back. "You're destabilizing the node," he hissed. "Good," Elias said, and lobbed the bowl of oatmeal he'd been carrying into the nearest conduit. The scream that followed sounded like a civilization having an allergic reaction to carbohydrates. The reliquary pulsed violently. Cray tried to reassert control, reaching toward the primary matrix. Eris moved faster. She slipped between the refracted arcs and pressed her hand against the core. A spiraling thought crystal, flickering with centuries of burden. "I don't reject memory," she said aloud, "but I refuse to be ruled by it." The crystal flared. Cray shouted something in ancient Lithari that translated loosely to, "May your internal architecture develop termites." Then the chamber cracked open like an eye awakening. Light poured through, not blinding, but honest. The memories on the walls shimmered, softened. Some faded, others shrank into manageable truths. The choir stopped singing. One of them coughed awkwardly. Elias turned to Eris. Did we just exercise a psychic cathedral using empathy and hot breakfast? It appears so. I want that on my tombstone. Cray, kneeling, stared into the void. You've doomed us. No, Eris said. We've given us a chance. Behind them, the whisper song played a triumphant chime, followed by what might have been a kazoo solo. They left the Axis reliquary in silence, except for the whisper song, which insisted on humming a tune Eris later identified as an ancient Lethari lullaby, and Elias swore was just an off-key version of space cowboy ragtime. Cray had been left in containment, sealed within a harmonic cocoon of his own making. His memories looping quietly, no longer dangerous, just unfinished. Elias stood at the edge of the ship's observation shell, coffee in one hand, bowl of celebratory oatmeal in the other. Still tastes like generational trauma, he muttered. Eris appeared beside him, sipping something far more elegant and probably brewed using gravitational resonance. You're quiet. Trying it out, he said. Feels unnatural. She smiled. You did well. I weaponized porridge against a psychic god. I'll expect medals, possibly a breakfast-themed monument. The stars drifted by like slow confessions. Behind them, the reliquary had begun to collapse. Not violently, but gracefully, as if it had simply decided to rest after a long, exhausting stretch of remembering too much. So now what? Elias asked. We declare victory? Go home? Wait for the next existential horror to crawl out of someone's metaphorical subconscious? Peace is rarely permanent, Eris said, but it is a choice, and some choices ripple. He studied her. You've changed too, you know. I stopped dreaming about war, she said. I started dreaming about what comes after. I still dream about malfunctioning vending machines and being late to briefings with no pants. Progress, she said. The ship pinged gently and extended a translucent tendril toward Elias. He looked at it suspiciously. This isn't another emotional check-in, is it? I'm running out of metaphors. It's a memory imprint invitation, Eris said. The ship wants to record your presence. For the future. For its own learning. Elias eyed the tendril. What if I say no? Then it'll get passive-aggressively dim whenever you walk by. He grunted and touched the tendril. A flicker of warmth passed through him. Not invasive, not intrusive. Just acknowledgement. He didn't see his life flash before his eyes. Just one moment. That day on Vereen Theta. The rubble. Her face. The decision. The ship pulsed. A soft chime played. See? Eris said. Now it remembers you too. Great. I've imprinted on a glorified psychic jellyfish. She turned to him, eyes gentle. You said something back in the reliquary about confession without absolution. Yeah, what about it? You gave yourself absolution. You chose to act again, without orders, without a cause, just because it was right. He looked away, watching a comet pass lazily through a nebula that glowed like bruised light. I don't think I'm the man I used to be. I don't think you ever were, she said. That's the point. The whisper song plotted a course back toward the aligned systems. A new diplomatic station had been approved, a neutral space where Lethari humans could work without needing to justify their scars. Eris had been asked to lead its creation. You'll stay there? Elias asked. For a while. Need a security chief? She looked at him. You'd take the job? I've got experience in not dying and making jokes at inappropriate times. Also, a deep knowledge of malfunctioning coffee machines. Then yes, you're hired. He nodded. I'll bring my own cereal. They stood in silence again. This time it wasn't awkward. It was earned. Far behind them, the Saragos echo drifted into dormancy. Not dead, not gone, but no longer alone. Later that evening, Elias found a quiet corner of the ship and recorded a message. Not to anyone in particular, just in case. If anyone finds this, and I'm somehow dead or absorbed into a cosmic emotion sponge, please know, I did my best. Also, avoid the oatmeal. Seriously, just don't. He ended the log and stared out the window again. Eris passed by and nodded. He saluted her with his mug. And for the first time in decades, Captain Elias Wren wasn't waiting for the past to catch up with him. He was already ahead of it. On the 47th day of her official non-existence, Jareen discovered that gravity was optional, sarcasm was universal, and public shaming ceremonies always overran schedule if catered. The ritual of severance had been precisely timed to begin at the lunar dusk, where the sun curled over Beryllium 9's fourth moon and bathed the ceremonial chimes in weepy blue light. Unfortunately, her grandmother had insisted on giving a eulogy, despite being very much alive and very much a passive-aggressive champion. She was born under the whispering auroras, the elder croaked from atop her anti-grav dais, and from the first moment, we knew she would never bloom. The crowd murmured in what was either solemnity or gastric distress. Jareen stood in the middle of the dais circle, wearing the traditional robes of unbirth, gray, hooded, and just slightly itchy in the elbow. She could not produce eggs, grandmother intoned. Her womb echoes like an abandoned corridor in a mothballed spaceship. Very poetic, Jareen muttered under her breath. Do I get a certificate? Her brother Karan, ever helpful, leaned in. Technically, you get deregistered from the genetic archive, social identity cloud, and lunch discount list. But you get to keep your socks. Well, thank prophecy for small mercies. By the time the chimes signaled the moment of exile, her name had already been scrubbed from the Alari consensus net. Drones floated by, collecting her family crest, her ceremonial ear cuffs, and, confusingly, her toothbrush. One final gift was offered, a compressed travel sphere containing soup rations, dried optimism, and a one-way shuttle ticket to Dunnot Station, which was known galaxy-wide as a place where dreams went to get pickpocketed. They didn't even escort her to the port. That would have required eye contact. Dunnot, true to rumor, smelled like someone had tried to synthesize a wet dog using incense and regret. The station orbited a gas giant that occasionally burped radiation spikes into nearby systems, creating the charming local phrase, "Done not, you don't." Jareen's first step onto the docking platform was met with a low whistle. A humanoid figure lounged against a vending unit, one foot propped on a crate marked "not explosive," mostly. Now that, he said, eyes scanning her ear ridges with comical reverence, is either the ceremonial garb of an exiled Alari noble or the world's saddest robe party. She raised an eyebrow. Do you speak to all women like they just stepped out of a family funeral? Only if they look like they've won the most gracefully banished award, he grinned. Name's Theo. You? She hesitated, remembering her legal identity had been deleted. Soup. Bold, mysterious, possibly nutritious. He held out a flatbread parcel wrapped in foil. You look hungry and disoriented, and probably too dignified to admit either. She took the offering warily, unwrapping the layers. It contained something red, green, and vaguely aggressive smelling. What is it? Tomato pepper wrap. Probably. Hard to tell since the replicator's been improvising lately. Jareen stared at the wrap, then back at him. I don't need pity. Oh, good, he said cheerfully. I only carry sarcasm and poor life choices. Theo turned out to be a self-described cultural salvage specialist, which in practical terms meant he collected discarded alien furniture and resold it as ancient ceremonial relics to tourists with too much credit and not enough skepticism. He claimed to own 5 spoons that once belonged to the great ambassador of Betaloon, though Jareen had only seen 2, both bent. He also lived aboard a small ship called the Maybe, a vessel that looked like a luxury yacht had been duct-taped to a garbage hauler and then painted with enthusiasm rather than precision. I built it myself, he said proudly as she stepped aboard, ducking under a dangling pipe that wheezed when you insulted it. With what? Leftover confidence? A little of that, a little scrap, and a lot of denial. She was going to refuse his offer of shelter. She really was. But her travel sphere had dissolved, the local hostel was full of karaoke monks, and someone had tried to sell her a sleeping pod made entirely out of sneeze-reactive foam. So she stayed. One night, over lukewarm soup and a radio broadcast of wormhole jazz, Theo asked the question she'd been bracing for. Do you miss them? No, she answered too fast. Right, he said, slurping. Because nothing says family like ritualized abandonment. I was infertile, she said, voice taut. They believe reproduction is the only legacy. No eggs, no value. Theo tilted his head. That's absurd. Says the man who collects ceremonial forks. Spoons. Still absurd, he chuckled. Look, Soup, Jareen, legacy isn't what you leave in someone's bloodstream. It's what you leave in their inbox. She blinked. That is either the worst proverb I've ever heard or the best. I've got more where that came from. Want to hear about the time I accidentally married a robot via emoji? She allowed a small smile. Surprise me. It happened 3 weeks later. A local Alari cultural bar was hosting a multi-species unity night where drinks were named after paradoxes and music was played in 4 incompatible time signatures. Theo had consumed something called a quantum martini, which vibrated between alcoholic and deeply apologetic. When Jareen excused herself to the lavatory, Theo, prompted by equal parts tipsiness and affection, invoked the ancient Illyri bonding rite by accident. He stood on a stool, proclaimed himself her familial heir, and misquoted an old vow while pointing at a blinking bartender droid. The bartender, programmed for compliance and void recognition, stamped the rite into the planetary legal archive. By the time Jareen returned, Theo had formally adopted himself into her ancestral bloodline, claimed protector status, and been awarded a complimentary plate of moss-based snacks. You what? She said. I think I just became your heir, he said, dazed and holding up the receipt. There was a long silence. Then Jareen exhaled slowly, rubbed her temples, and muttered, Well, at least you'll get my toothbrush. The thing about accidentally performing an interspecies familial rite, particularly one with legal binding recognized across 12 planetary jurisdictions and 1 sentient cloud, is that eventually someone notices. Jareen woke up to 3 notifications on her retinal HUD, 1 from the Alari Ancestral Registry, 1 from the Department of Cross-Cultural Legacies, and 1 ominously titled Inheritance Council Summons. Please bring a witness. She stared at them for a moment, then threw a pillow at Theo. Ow, he mumbled from the floor, where he'd apparently fallen asleep upside down on a pile of antique utensils. Was that necessary? You invoked a sacred rite in front of a bartender droid with a flickering eye and a stutter. It blinked twice, he argued. That's a witness response in at least 4 galactic legal systems. That was a malfunction. Still counts. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Jareen pulled up the full document. Sure enough, Theo was now listed as her designated heir, ceremonial guardian, and familial anchor, a title that came with several privileges, including emergency diplomatic immunity, discount funeral rights, and partial access to her ancestors' poetry archives, most of which consisted of moaning about droughts and lyrical couplets. So what now, he asked, chewing on a protein bar labeled, probably not venomous. Now, she said, we go to Orbit Court. Theo blinked. That sounds expensive. Oh, it is, she muttered, scanning the summons. Court robes are mandatory, so is emotional transparency. And apparently we have to float slightly above the floor the whole time. Wait, literally float? Yes, symbolic elevation. If your boots touch the floor, it implies spiritual insecurity. Do hover socks count? They arrived at Orbitar Judicial Hub 9, a swirling mess of mirrored glass and bureaucratic ego, shaped like a gavel mid-slam. The entrance was guarded by 2 semi-sentient gate pylons who demanded proof of dignity before allowing entry. Theo offered a performance of Ode to a Flatbread in minor key. One of the pylons wept. Inside, Jareen changed into the traditional Ilari litigation robe, which shimmered between green and disappointment depending on the wearer's emotional honesty. Theo borrowed an ambassadorial sash from a pawn shop and wore it like a confused wizard. They entered the floating hall of oaths. 12 counselors hovered in crescent formation, their anti-grav thrones emitting a faint hum like passive-aggressive bees. In the center of the court floated a glowing spindle labeled, Speak clearly into the orb. State your case, one counselor intoned, his ears flaring with ceremonial skepticism. Jareen stepped forward, pulse steady. This bond was not formed with deception. It was unexpected, yes. Unconventional, but not false. Human, another counselor said, eyes narrowing. Do you comprehend the gravity of the right you invoked? I was promised drinks and harmony, Theo said. What I got was bureaucracy and snacks that smell like mossy soap. A few counselors exchanged glances. One might have chuckled. Do you intend to act as heir in full accordance with Alari tradition? The central judge asked. Theo stepped forward, adjusted his sash, and solemnly declared, I do not know all your customs, but I know loyalty. I know what it means to stand by someone when they've been thrown away. I may not have ears that sing, but I've got a weird-shaped heart that tries. There was silence. Then a rustle as someone in the gallery dropped a brochure. Jareen turned slightly, hiding a smirk. Let it be recorded, the judge said slowly, that the human has offered a declaration of intent in poetic form. I also brought muffins, Theo added. For the court, they're sin fruit, possibly still sentient. The bailiff, a lumpy orb with several arms and a clipboard, accepted the offering with cautious gratitude. Deliberation took 3 hours, a dramatic reenactment, and one intermission for musical diplomacy. While the council debated, Jareen and Theo waited in the hall of probable decisions, surrounded by others facing trials. One woman accused of illegal star breeding, a robot arguing with itself over self-inheritance, and a tree filing for divorce from the wind. Theo practiced bowing without levitating backward. Jareen quietly watched a video of her younger self in ceremonial training, mouthing the ancestral scripts she'd once believed would matter. They might say no, she said eventually. They might, Theo agreed upside down. Then what? He thought for a moment. Then we do something worse. Worse? We bond again, publicly, at a sports event, with interpretive dance. She snorted. That would cause a diplomatic incident. He nodded. Perfect. The verdict was delivered with maximum theatricality. Lights dimmed. The main judge floated down with a rustle of robes and a tablet that shimmered with unreadable runes. Though the ritual was improperly performed, the judge said, and the witness possessed insufficient emotional programming, the human's intent has passed all scrutiny modules. The bond shall stand. Theo blinked. Wait, we won? You are now her legal heir and shield. May your presence bring honor or, at the very least, mildly entertaining consequences. One counselor raised a hand. However, as is custom, the heir must receive a gift symbolizing familial acceptance. Jareen stepped forward. From her sleeve, she withdrew a small, coiled ear cuff etched in ancestral script. Her final token, never expected to be used. She handed it to Theo. This belonged to my mother's line. It's ceremonial, symbolic. Don't chew on it. He accepted it like it was glowing. I shall treasure it, and try not to wear it as a toe ring. A ripple of confused approval moved through the chamber. They left the court under a fake sun and a real fine for hover parking in a restricted zone. Theo held the ear cuff in his hand like it might whisper secrets if you were patient enough. Jareen walked beside him, silent for a long time. So, he said at last, does this mean I get invited to ancestral dinner parties now? No, she said. It means if I die, you inherit my debts. Oh, he said, mock solemn, I shall spend them wisely. On what? More sentient muffins. Possibly a new grav toilet. Ours wheezes when I think sad thoughts. She laughed, and for the first time in years, it wasn't followed by an apology. The thing about accidentally performing an interspecies familial rite, particularly one with legal binding recognized across 12 planetary jurisdictions and one sentient cloud, is that eventually someone notices. Jareen woke up to 3 notifications on her retinal HUD. One from the Ellery Ancestral Registry, one from the Department of Cross-Cultural Legacies, and one ominously titled, Inheritance Council Summons. Please bring a witness. She stared at them for a moment, then threw a pillow at Theo. Ow, he mumbled from the floor, where he'd apparently fallen asleep upside down on a pile of antique utensils. Was that necessary? You invoked a sacred rite in front of a bartender droid with a flickering eye and a stutter. It blinked twice, Sorno, he argued. That's a witness response in at least 4 galactic legal systems. That was a malfunction. Still counts. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Jareen pulled up the full document. Sure enough, Theo was now listed as her designated heir, ceremonial guardian, and familial anchor, a title that came with several privileges, including emergency diplomatic immunity, discount funeral rights, and partial access to her ancestors' poetry archives, most of which consisted of moaning about droughts in lyrical couplets. "So what now?" he asked, chewing on a protein bar labeled, "probably not venomous." "Now," she said, "we go to Orbit Court." Theo blinked. "That sounds expensive." "Oh, it is," she muttered, scanning the summons. "Court robes are mandatory, so is emotional transparency, and apparently we have to float slightly above the floor the whole time." "Wait, literally float?" "Yes. Symbolic elevation. If your boots touch the floor, it implies spiritual insecurity. Do hover socks count?" They arrived at Orbitar Judicial Hub 9, a swirling mess of mirrored glass and bureaucratic ego, shaped like a gavel mid-slam. The entrance was guarded by two semi-sentient gate pylons who demanded proof of dignity before allowing entry. Theo offered a performance of Ode to a Flatbread in minor key. One of the pylons wept. Inside, Jareen changed into the traditional Ilari litigation robe, which shimmered between green and disappointment depending on the wearer's emotional honesty. Theo borrowed an ambassadorial sash from a pawn shop and wore it like a confused wizard. They entered the floating hall of oaths. 12 counselors hovered in crescent formation, their anti-grav thrones emitting a faint hum like passive-aggressive bees. In the center of the court floated a glowing spindle labeled, "Speak clearly into the orb." "State your case," one counselor intoned, his ears flaring with ceremonial skepticism. Jareen stepped forward, pulse steady. "This bond was not formed with deception. It was unexpected, yes, unconventional, but not false. Human," another counselor said, eyes narrowing. "Do you comprehend the gravity of the right you invoked?" "I was promised drinks and harmony," Theo said. "What I got was bureaucracy and snacks that smell like mossy soap." A few counselors exchanged glances. One might have chuckled. "Do you intend to act as heir in full accordance with Ilari tradition?" the central judge asked. Theo stepped forward, adjusted his sash, and solemnly declared, "I do not know all your customs, but I know loyalty. I know what it means to stand by someone when they've been thrown away. I may not have ears that sing, but I've got a weird-shaped heart that tries." There was silence, then a rustle as someone in the gallery dropped a brochure. Jareen turned slightly, hiding a smirk. "Let it be recorded," the judge said slowly, "that the human has offered a declaration of intent in poetic form." "I also brought muffins," Theo added, "for the court. They're sin fruit, possibly still sentient." The bailiff, a lumpy orb with several arms and a clipboard, accepted the offering with cautious gratitude. Deliberation took 3 hours, a dramatic reenactment, and one intermission for musical diplomacy. While the council debated, Jareen and Theo waited in the hall of probable decisions, surrounded by others facing trials, one woman accused of illegal starbreeding, a robot arguing with itself over self-inheritance, and a tree filing for divorce from the wind. Theo practiced bowing without levitating backward. Jareen quietly watched a video of her younger self in ceremonial training, mouthing the ancestral scripts she'd once believed would matter. "They might say no," she said eventually. "They might," Theo agreed, upside down. "Then what?" He thought for a moment. "Then we do something worse." "Worse? We bond again, publicly, at a sports event, with interpretive dance." She snorted. "That would cause a diplomatic incident." He nodded. "Perfect." The verdict was delivered with maximum theatricality. Lights dimmed. The main judge floated down with a rustle of robes and a tablet that shimmered with unreadable runes. "Though the ritual was improperly performed," the judge said, "and the witness possessed insufficient emotional programming, the human's intent has passed all scrutiny modules. The bond shall stand." Theo blinked. "Wait, we won? You are now her legal heir and shield. May your presence bring honor or, at the very least, mildly entertaining consequences." One counselor raised a hand. "However, as is custom, The heir must receive a gift symbolizing familial acceptance. Jareen stepped forward. From her sleeve, she withdrew a small, coiled ear cuff etched in ancestral script. Her final token, never expected to be used. She handed it to Theo. This belonged to my mother's line. It's ceremonial, symbolic. Don't chew on it. He accepted it like it was glowing. I shall treasure it and try not to wear it as a toe ring. A ripple of confused approval moved through the chamber. They left the court under a fake sun and a real fine for hover parking in a restricted zone. Theo held the ear cuff in his hand like it might whisper secrets if you were patient enough. Jareen walked beside him, silent for a long time. So, he said at last, does this mean I get invited to ancestral dinner parties now? No, she said. It means if I die, you inherit my debts. Oh, he said, mock solemn, I shall spend them wisely. On what? More sentient muffins, possibly a new grab toilet. Ours wheezes when I think sad thoughts. She laughed, and for the first time in years, it wasn't followed by an apology. Jareen woke to an emergency klaxon and the unmistakable smell of burning moss. She sat bolt upright, ears twitching, and immediately regretted it. The maybe ceiling was low and unforgiving. She rubbed the sore spot and bolted for the cockpit, where Theo was spinning in a chair and holding a cup of something that looked like hot enthusiasm. Why are we under red alert? She asked. Theo grinned. Technically, we're under mildly concerned alert. I downgraded it. The ship AI insists it's an emergency, but honestly, I think she's just being dramatic. I heard that, said the ship's voice. I'm not dramatic, I'm specific. Jareen scanned the blinking console. There's a ping from the interstellar registry. Someone's put out an inquiry on my identity. Theo leaned over. That can't be good, unless it's a fan letter. Are you famous? Secret pop star career I should know about? She tapped into the encrypted data stream and frowned. It's a corporate signature. Womb Spark Incorporated Biotech Conglomerate. Fertility Enhancement Sector. Theo raised an eyebrow. They sell eggs. They manufacture hope, in vials, with side effects. Ah, the classy kind of nightmare fuel. Jareen scrolled further. They've tagged me in a data breach investigation, claiming I may be in possession of unauthorized ovum sequences. Theo blinked. Wait, like eggs? Not literal eggs, genetic code. They think I'm carrying artificial reproductive data. But you're infertile. That's the point, she muttered. They want to prove I'm not, that I faked my exile. If they succeed, it discredits not just me, but the bond we made. Theo frowned. So you're saying we're being targeted by space fertility lobbyists? She nodded grimly. That's ridiculous, he said, then paused. Also weirdly flattering. Kyoda may be rerouted toward an unregistered asteroid port on the edge of the Feral Drift, a neutral zone mostly used by smugglers, monks, and extremely nervous poets. The ship docked with a groan, followed by an accusatory sigh from the floor panels. As they stepped onto the platform, a drone whizzed past, trailing a banner that read, "Reproduce responsibly," in flashing pastel letters. Subtle, Theo said. They made their way to an old contact of Jareen's, a cyber ethicist named Vels who lived inside a converted meteorite and brewed his own ink from stardust algae. He greeted them with 2 hands, a tail slap, and a small cupcake that had somehow become self-aware. Jareen, Vels said, last time I saw you, you were arguing with a philosopher about ear symmetry. He started it. Fair, and you, Vels turned to Theo, are the accidental heir? Theo beamed. I'm also a terrible dancer. Vels waved them inside. You're being hunted. A corporate ghost protocol has locked onto Jareen's biosignature. They've woven false reproductive code into your spinal resonance field. My what? Jareen asked. It's the part of your nervous system that sings when you're not listening. Very trendy. Theo leaned in. So they hacked her back? Metaphorically, it's buried in the resonance. Makes her read as someone carrying illicit biotech data. So I'm a walking scandal, Jareen said. A humming one, Vels corrected. We'll need to extract the code, disprove the sequence, and humiliate a megacorp all before lunch. I miss when my problems were just social exile, she muttered. They snuck into a diagnostics lab disguised as health inspectors. Theo wore a lab coat that had been tailored for something with 3 arms, and Jareen wore a look of carefully practiced apathy. The receptionist, a cyborg named Gilda, barely looked up from her knitting. "Scan Bay 3, Gilda droned. "Don't touch the walls. They hold grudges." Inside, Vels activated a resonance array. The lights dimmed. Jareen lay on a padded table while coils of soft light swept across her spine, whispering in low tones. Theo stood awkwardly by the corner. "Is this where I offer moral support? Snacks? Dramatic music?" "Shh," said Vels. "We're listening to her nervous system sing the corporate anthem." "That's horrifying." The scan revealed it, a buried loop of encoded genetic propaganda pulsating faintly within her, a signature from womb spark disguised as a natural fluctuation. It claimed she possessed synthetic ovum strands, enough to classify her as a biodata trafficker under galactic law. "They embedded it during exile," Vels muttered, "probably during the final registry wipe. No one noticed. It looks like a natural echo." Jareen sat up, fuming. "They made sure I'd never be seen as truly infertile, so I couldn't be truly free." Theo picked up a nearby calibration probe and pointed it like a sword. "Then let's make this public. Break their code. Show the galaxy what they did." Vels nodded. "I know just the place. The Open Frequencies Court. No robe floating, just truth, and maybe some yelling." "I'm good at yelling," Theo said proudly. En route to the broadcast court, they were intercepted. A womb spark envoy ship blocked their path, a sleek, gold-trimmed menace with the corporate motto, "Life is a choice, we own," emblazoned on the side. The envoy contacted them with a smile so plastic it might have been manufactured. "Jareen of Alari, you are invited to participate in a settlement conversation," the envoy said. Jareen narrowed her eyes. "Let me guess. You offer to scrub the code if I endorse your fertility line." "Precisely. You'll be hailed as a miracle, a redemption, a triumph of biotech over tradition." Theo laughed. "Wow. You guys market treachery like it's flavored toothpaste. Refusing this offer may result in reputational consequences." Jareen leaned into the screen. "I already lost my name. What's one more smear?" She ended the call and turned to Theo. "Let's go ruin someone's day." He grinned. "After we get snacks. You argue better when you're not hangry." The Open Frequencies Court was little more than a signal tower, a radio judge, and a galaxy-wide transmission feed. Vels uploaded the hacked resonance pattern. Theo made a speech that mostly involved waving spoons and declaring, "I choose this family." Jareen stepped to the mic. Her voice, at first unsure, grew strong. "I was declared empty," she said, "but that emptiness was rewritten. I was made into a vessel I never chose to be, and now I choose again." The signal spread, across channels, across borders, across languages. Womb Spark issued a recall. Their stock plummeted. Someone on Beryllium 9 made a sculpture of Jareen out of dried moss. Theo offered her a high five. She took it. "I think we just got very, very sued," he said. "Good," Jareen replied. "Let's counter-sue with interpretive dance." The maybe had never seen this much legal mail. The inbox panel blinked in a slow, menacing rhythm. 12 lawsuits, 3 cease and desist holograms, a poem from someone named Eggwitch99, threatening spiritual litigation, and one very polite request for Theo's muffin recipe. "Your muffins have gone viral," Jareen muttered, scrolling through the chaos. "Also, someone wants to scan your DNA to prove it contains anti-corporate yeast." Theo shrugged, flipping a spatula in one hand and a transmission blocker in the other. "Good. Let my muffins be the revolution's fuel." Vels crouched under a panel, rerouting the ship's defense algorithms into an email filter, hissed through a mouthful of cables. "You've disrupted a multi-billion credit fertility lobby. They are not going to lose gracefully." Jareen was already suited up for the trial of sound and bone. She hadn't worn her ancestral vestments in years. The fabric adjusted to her pulse, glowing a faint silver blue that pulsed in rhythm with her nervous system. The trial would take place on Beryllium 9, at the Resonance Sanctuary, a place where sound and bone met in judgment and secrets shattered like cheap ceramics. They want me to crack, she said, to sing the truth and watch it turn to lies under their manipulations. Theo appeared beside her, holding a small box. What's that? She asked. My contribution, he said, opening it to reveal a pair of noise-canceling ear socks. They don't cancel sound. They just muffle existential dread. She stared at him. Fine, he muttered. They're symbolic. The resonance sanctuary was perched atop a cliff, carved by centuries of wind chimes and maternal expectations. Jareen and Theo arrived under scrutiny. Drone cams floated around them like bored wasps. News feeds tagged her with increasingly absurd titles. The Barren Flame, Eggless Empress, in Theo's personal favorite. Defiant Womb Ship Captain. She's not, but it's clicky. Inside, the chamber was cavernous, the walls lined with harmonic stones that captured every syllable and spun them into vibrational patterns readable by a council of resonance judges. These judges were all biologically modified to detect deceit through ear twitch, skin tone oscillation, and metaphorical density. You may begin, the lead judge announced, tuning his own vocal cords like a harp. Jareen stepped into the center, her boots hovering 2 centimeters above the marble floor. Theo sat behind a frequency screen marked Bonded Air, No Snacks Allowed. She began to sing. The melody was not melodic. It was raw, discordant, true. She sang her exile, her rejection, her sterilization, not of body but of lineage. She sang of her bond to Theo, not forged through ritual perfection, but through absurdity and defiance. And then she did the unthinkable. She altered the song, not to lie, but to insert her story, her choice, not as a victim, as a rogue variable. The stones reacted, first with uncertainty, then with vibration, then with laughter. A low echoing sound, deep harmonious chuckles, like the universe had finally gotten a joke it forgot it told. The judges sat frozen. The lead judge cleared his throat, adjusting his headgear in visible confusion. That has never happened. Theo pressed his face against the frequency screen. Did she just make the rocks laugh? Yes, one of the other judges whispered. They found her testimony not only true, but emotionally refreshing. She rewrote her resonance profile, another judge muttered. She turned trial into improvisation. She's jazz, said the oldest judge reverently. Outside, reporters swarmed like gossipy birds. Jareen stood on the steps of the sanctuary, robes flickering with relaxed defiance. Theo was still trying to find a quiet place to hide his celebratory kazoo. We're not done, she said, speaking to the cams. They wrote me off, rewrote my body, told me I had no voice, but I found one, and now it's backed by rock-solid approval. Theo leaned in. Also, her air makes fantastic muffins. Cameras blinked. One reporter blinked twice. So, what's next? Jareen turned to Theo. You said something once, she began, about turning the punchline into a revolution. I also said my pillow was whispering secrets. Are you sure we're referencing the right quote? She smiled. Let's start a broadcast. A what? A roaming signal. A show about unclaimed families, found legacies, and bureaucratic sabotage. Theo's eyes widened. Like a podcast, a soulcast, with theme music, with rhythm, with interpretive puppet reenactments. We'll negotiate. Back aboard the Maybe, Vels was already setting up a broadcast relay. Jareen drafted the manifesto. Theo tested muffins on a passing nebula crab. The ship adjusted its interior lighting to revolutionary glow. They launched the first episode of Unbound and Resonant to minor fanfare and major curiosity. Within the first hour, 7 listeners cried. 2 called in to confess they'd faked their family legacies. One man sobbed, I thought I was an heir to a dynasty. Turns out I just inherited a very bitter cactus. Theo took the call and replied, water it. Or don't. Maybe it's symbolic. Jareen ended the show with a simple truth. I was made empty by design, but I filled myself with something they never expected. Choice. Choice, Theo added. And probably too much cinnamon. I got excited. The Maybe drifted on, carrying its strange crew through starlight and static. The bond remained not perfect, but present. The galaxy, for once, was listening. A year after the trial of sound and bone, the maybe floated in a sector no one could quite name. Technically, it had been named, but only by a cartographer who was later discovered to be an enthusiastic octopus. The crew kept calling it the middle of everywhere. Jareen sat in the pilot's chair, wearing socks with galaxies stitched across the toes, and reading messages from a growing inbox labeled Echoes. Each was a story. A runaway monk who'd broken from his assigned silence, a mechanic who'd adopted a sentient fern instead of continuing her bloodline, a clone who refused his template's destiny and took up interpretive dance. Theo entered with a tray of experimental muffins and a small cloud of edible glitter trailing behind him. This one might contain basil, but it also might contain minor telepathic feedback. Eat responsibly. She picked one up, took a cautious bite, and blinked. I can hear your childhood disappointment in sports. Theo pointed triumphantly. See? Flavor and trauma. Vels's face appeared on the comm screen, upside down as always. You're trending again, he said. Episode 28 of Unbound and Resonant broke 10 million synaptic streams, especially the segment where Theo fell out of his chair during the metaphysics debate. It was a dramatic reenactment, Theo said, indignant. You shouted, "Gravity is a myth," and then cried. Method acting. Jareen muted them both, only because she'd found a message flagged in bold from the Alari Council. It was marked Resolution, Lineage Archive Amendment Proposal. She stared at it for a long moment, then she opened it. The council, in language that had clearly been reviewed by 3 lawyers and a deeply insecure poet, offered her a formal reinstatement, full access to the lineage network, an honorary matron title, retroactive apology benefits, 1 voucher for an egg-shaped garden sculpture. Do you want it? Theo asked softly. I don't know, she said. It would mean going back, not physically, just aligning again. I spent so long proving I didn't need that, but also proving that you did exist, that you were never defective. You changed the terms. She stared at the screen, then deleted the message. I already made my archive, she said. It just happens to be streaming on 7 platforms. Theo handed her another muffin. This one had a little flag that said emotional growth inside. A week later, a small diplomatic shuttle arrived, flagged with both Ilari and human peace sigils, which looked suspiciously like a handshake between 2 forks. Out stepped Minister Jolden, Ilari, high-ranking, ears like polished obsidian, and eyes that twitched with carefully contained respect. He brought a delegation of bioethicists, historians, and one very confused biologist who kept asking where the genetic heirloom room was. I am here, Jolden said, to discuss integration protocols, and possibly muffins. Your movement has destabilized several inheritance-based economies. The planetary tax systems are crying. We accept payment in moss or high fives, Theo said. Jareen stepped forward. We'll talk terms, but not from the old model. We start from now, from bonds chosen, not assigned. Jolden nodded once. Your proposal has already reached the core systems. Parents naming humans as cultural heirs. A sentient slime adopted a poet. A woman in Sector 12 rejected her dynasty and passed on her house to a mushroom. Theo leaned in. I love this timeline. The Maybe's final broadcast episode aired on the anniversary of their bond. Theo had planned an intro with fireworks, balloons, and a rap about found family. Jareen edited it down to 7 seconds of static and a brief ear twitch that said no. Instead, they sat down. No ceremony, just conversation. I used to think legacy was something you inherited, Jareen said. Now I know it's something you build, sometimes from broken pieces. I used to think I was the sidekick, Theo added. Turns out I was the heir to a revolution. Also, I accidentally married a cactus. Long story. They read stories from listeners. They laughed. They cried when a sentient AI sent a poem titled, Protocol Doesn't Define Me. At the end, Jareen said, I never laid an egg. But I started something. I don't know what it'll grow into, but it's alive. Theo raised a toast with a sparkly muffin. To us, living proof that family is weirder, louder, and better than anyone expects. The broadcast ended. The ship hummed. Somewhere a stone laughed. And the stars, always listening, pulsed a little brighter.